Next, I don't go through all of them. Next. And this is a longer story. This is the model we made with Arup, which we could speed up and slow down and essentially illustrate the behavior of the glazing system, because we had a lot of glass and there was some disputation about the capacity of glass to move sound. Next one. Next. And so this was the final of the second phase. And I guess the end of this story is that the story has not ended. It was given to a French architect who worked for a while, and then he lost the commission. And best I know now, it's being done by a Canadian architect, which is, and I think we tried to dispense with this already, has become a box of some kind, not yet built. Next. So the next one, this is another competition we won. This is interesting in a political way for us, because New York City has a history of, I don't know what would be the appropriate terminology, but let's call it political shenanigans. That probably is a legible term, in giving out work. So they decided to clean the slate, and they would do it. A remarkable jury, wonderful jury, open competition. So we won this competition for the New York City building, which is off the Grand Central Parkway in the Van Wyck, next to Arthur Ashe, next to Shea Stadium. So this was a remake of an existing building called the New York City building. Next. And I don't have a laser, but this is in the foreground. This is the Grand Central Parkway, the Van Wyck, courtesy of our friend Robert Moses. This is the zoo over here, Little Zoo in Queens. Next. And what we did, I think this gets back to what I would consider to be an important aspect of the contemporary discussion, which is policy and public policy and urban strategy as it relates to making decisions about the content of architecture. And we used, what happened in the project was you came from the zoo and you moved as a pedestrian through the arts building and then on to Arthur Ashe and Shea Stadium. And this was the argument we made. The antecedent for that argument belongs to two cases, both of which you probably know pretty well. One is next to the yard at Harvard, I'm trying to remember the streets, but between Prescott Street and Quincy Street, and you see the red line, and this is Le Corbusier at the Carpenter Center. What's interesting in a policy sense about the building is that's a building for the arts, for sculpture, for media, for painting, all of that. So you don't go there unless you're involved in the arts. Yes, you do. Because if you're going from physics to English and it's snowing, this is the route to physics. So you cut through the building, and by the way, I can't tell you how many physicists have converted to the art world, but maybe a few. But the point really is to open up to a more public discourse, a discussion which is largely local or closed or sectarian, whatever word you like, and doing that by running the public through. Same thing was done in the Staatsgallery by Jim Sterling, who knows Le Corbusier very well and built a building up the street. So if you live at the top of the hill and you want to get it, the aspirations aren't so great, but if you live here, up here, and you want to get to the bus stop down here, you move through the building as a pedestrian. You walk through the building, you see the art, you get on the bus, and you go wherever you're going, and maybe at some point you change your mind and come back and become an aficionado of art or something. But I don't mean to be facetious about it. I think we live in a world where purpose and use is sequestered as a function of the users. And this was an argument for bringing a public aspect to what essentially are private venues. Anyway, next. Don't go through all of these. Next. 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 This is Mexico City. National Library, we didn't win. Sadly, we lost by 1 vote from an Anglo. And I know. And this is the train station, but this is interesting. A train station, to get the magnitude, this is northwest center of Mexico City. This is an invited international competition. I don't know if I explained that, for the National Library of Mexico. So this is a big and important project. And the train station, which we integrated into the library idea, and this is the library side on the right, in the same way that the Carpenter Center and the Staatsgalerie used public movement in order to mix nominally unlike uses in the project. So anyway, the train brings about 300,000 people from the suburbs a day into Mexico City, and the library is built on the next site. Next one. And so I won't go through all of these, but we've made a habit now in talking to client of whether it's slightly disingenuous or not. We could talk another time, but if you start on the left and you read down to the lower right, you get the point that we did 1, and then we did 2, and then we did 3, and then we did 4, and it becomes a kind of inexorable argument, and of course couldn't be done any other way. Next. And then this was stage 1, the original model, and we rolled back the building on the front, which essentially sets up, in a policy sense, a very large public space shared between the library, the new library, and the train station. Next one. This is Teotihuacan, which many of you know. I think I've been there once or twice. It makes Albert Speer look like an amateur. It's colossal, really, stupendous in scale. The reason I showed it is, and this came up, and I mentioned this to Hernan because it surprised me. I gave a talk in Dubai the other night to the Dubai municipality, and the head guy of the Dubai municipality said, "Moss, what can we do this is Dubai, what can we do to sustain our local culture and our traditions that are getting," this is Dubai, "what can we," it's a little late to ask the question, never mind. But it's a poignant and pertinent and not an easy answer, and I blah 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 tried to talk around it. I'm not here to do that, but I do think that the subject for all of us is not only throwing around the word global and globalization, but also to understand the idiosyncrasies, the unique aspects, the personal aspects of life and culture from one place to the next are not entirely dissipating and going away. Next. And so what we did, again, I don't go through all the details, but in the makeup of the library, there are 4 courtyards. One belongs to the garden, one belongs to the children, one belongs to the museum, one belongs to the library. Each one also belongs to the seasons, and the shapes of the courtyard, the form language of the courtyard relating to the sun, sun in, sun out, belongs to 4 different pieces of the year. So there are 4 courts with 4 configurations, with 4 meanings, with 4 cosmological associations. This was the best I could do, and I don't claim that this is any breakthrough, trying to look at earlier and very powerful architecture from Mexico and find a way to see if we could associate those subjects rather than, you have to tell me whether we're close or whether we're not, but the aspiration was there. Next one. Next. Next. And this was the final rendering. Next one. This was another one, and I talked about this in London yesterday to Foster, who thinks he won this. just because he built it. But he didn't win. They called us first. So this is the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C., which is a repository of American history. And it's known, or it was originally known as the Patent Office Building, And inside the building were held models of what? Things like Alexander Graham Bell's telephone or Thomas Edison light bulb, things like that. And they said to us when we were in the competition, and you have to do that, meaning the investigatory content of the inventions need to be sustained by the investigatory content of the architecture. Now, whether that's sustained by rebuilding the roof of the British Museum, so we could debate. Next. So a few minutes ago, I criticized the reliance on art and the associations of art and architecture, and therefore hypocritically, one might say. We did it here. This is a Seurat painting, a French artist in the upper right, who has always interested me because his work in a sociological way, if you look at the banks of the Seine and so on, is very conservative sociologically. But if you look at his work in terms of technique, you know, this stuff, the dots, it's very radical work, actually. So it's possible in a way to combine both those aspects. And essentially what we decided to do was to make a surface. The surface is made of cylinders of laminated glass, 1 meter in diameter and somewhere between 6 and 14 meters in length. So they're huge. And in the aggregate, those points assembled over the surface of the Smithsonian make a roof, which then supports a plane of glass. Next one. The purpose of the project, as it was explained, was to make something. And you can see there are a series of Varendale trusses, and then the glass trusses, the glass tubes are cords in compression between a steel tube above and a cable below. I think this is where we ran into a debate with a jury, which was run by a guy named Aaron Betsky. So that the glass is used, it's used for a number of things. It's used for lighting, it's used for sound, it's used for acoustics, but it is used structurally. This is something that interests us, by the way, that whatever we do has any number of ways to explain what it is, not a single explanation. Anyway, next one. And we actually knew how to build this. On the top is the tube. There's a collar just below it, which attaches the tube to the laminated glass. Then a collar below, which holds the cable. And then the tube itself extends below the line of the collar, depending on where the line of acoustics hits at that particular point in space. Next. I think this is a model we made for the Biennale. It wasn't part of the presentation. Next. Next. I think this is the final drawing. Next. And then, fortuitously, our client in Central LA, Culver City, saw the competition and suggested that we do it at a smaller scale. So we're building it using that idea, but at a smaller scale with a group of shops surrounding a public space. Next. 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 And it even has a green roof. Next. This is off the Pearl River in China, of course. This is Guangzhou. And I think for me and for all of you who are working in China and traveling to China, one of the most fascinating aspects, particularly for an architect who grew up thinking that each building had a particular, potentially a particular meaning, to a city, to a culture, and to an architect. And the buildings outnumber. They come one after the other like a torrent next, coming down to the Pearl River. I won't go through all the diagrams, but if the upper left essentially shows an endless flood of high-rise buildings down to the Pearl River. The yellow piece is an art and music zone. The upper quadrant is a museum, not a museum, it is an opera house by Zaha Hadid, which was just finished. That was part of a competition. And the lower corner is the art museum. So essentially the objective was, wait a minute, let's stop the flood of commercial high-rise buildings, end it, and intervene urbanistically with a world of art and music and take that down to the Pearl River. Next. So this is an early model study. Next, that's the Pearl River in the foreground. Next one. And the museum essentially had four major components. Next. The idea, the raised earth we call the long art march, the long art march. And as you walked along, either toward the opera house or toward the museum, you entered the building in an introverted way, really the inside of the inside, and then went down. So the further you went, the further you were from the commercial obligations, which clearly seem to be the essential meaning of Guangdong province and Guangzhou. Next. Next. And a series of diagrams, essentially two spaces or two space types in the gallery blocks, one which emitted light, one which prevented light, and then a zone in between which essentially supported both. Next. And this is the long art march. Next. Next. I wanted to make a point about, since I did comment on 1925 assembly line technique and that kind of emphasis, that what you're looking at here are a series of sticks, and we came in, there's a block wall, and placed horizontal ledgers, the big sticks, and then horizontal sticks, and then vertical sticks. So there's a ledger, a horizontal stick, and a vertical stick. Next. And then in resolving that question by showing it so that you see the mechanism, but you see the mechanism just sporadically. So there is an interest in assembly, there is an interest in technique, but it's not an ideological one, it's done selectively. Next. And there's a series of these. Next. Next, and you see the pipes as beams, and then in this project, those pieces, the metallic pieces, each sit on one of these pipes. Next, and you see them in the interior holding both metal and glass. Next. Next. This also interests me, and I think I've touched on it in a different form as a topic, that questions of understanding have to do with questions of perception, and it's not a matter of going down the Champs-Élysées and seeing the Arc de Triomphe and taking a photograph and going home. I got it, I understand it. It's much more a question of multiple vantage points, looking, seeing, thinking, and understanding, and so on. Next. So this happens to be the lobby of an office building seen from 4 different vantage points. Next. This happens to be that building, which is of interest, I think, because it was built, you see the wood structure, it was originally a wood frame building, and we tore down everything except the posts and trusses, and then dropped a steel structure of tubes and wide flange beams, 4 stories on top. And then the admixture of the wood and the steel gave us some situations which you would never have encountered had you simply demolished the wood. Anyway, next. 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 And this is a house with, I think, similar aspirations for understanding from various points of view. Next. Next. And an office building that was done for Kodak in the late 90s, a stair up and a stair down. Next. Which was built in an alley in a tough part of the city of Los Angeles. So you see the alley there. Next. And then a structure which lifted the building above the road. So it's really an air rights project. Next. 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 You can see there the courtyard on the right, an open space. There are two of these in the building. Next. And this is an interior view of that, looking down into the court, which has a bridge and a pool. Next. And you can see the water. It's water that comes into the pool and immediately disappears, so it never puddles. It comes into the pool and then it simply drains. But it's cut back into the building. It's a very tough area, and there is something, back to the Mondrian discussion, of a sort of I was going to say spiritual. That may not be quite the word, but it's a respite or an essence in a way. Especially if you're out there alone, it lets you withdraw a little bit. Next. Next. Next project, I think, was of interest because we had to build it on the site of a toxic spill. Next. Which we converted into this open air seating outdoor area. With the steel doors which roll back. This building, again, is about, 110 meters long. Next. And this is owned by Ogilvy Incorporated, media graphics design company. Next. And this is the entrance area. Next. And for those of you interested in details, you can see the ends of the pipes are actually crushed in order to intersect with the columns. Next. And then a window that ends at infinity. Next. And then used as a party site by Ogilvy. Next. And this seemed to be always one of these, you never step into the same building twice, that as one moves through the section continues to change and evolve. Next. This is a very simple parking structure with an office. Wait a minute. With an office building. You can see the condition of the LA Philharmonic there. Next. Next. This hasn't been done yet, but is the ambition, and you can see the seating area out in front of the umbrella. Next. I won't show the whole thing, but it's an animation. So you see the garage, which is a simple structure. And then these are blocks of program elements of office space, a kitchen, storage area, conference space. That happens to be the height limit that just went passing through. And not this was cut from the back because, of course, automobiles are circulating around the building. And this prow in the front hangs over the entrance to the garage. There are actually two levels of space. One is an open plan. The second one that's the glazing on the perimeter. and the second level is a series of mezzanines. There's the glass. And this is the second level mezzanine. That's the elevator core. There's a bridge that is about to follow, stairs, and there's the bridge that connects the mezzanines. That's probably enough. You can go ahead. Let's go to the next one. This is a project, another invited one. Wasn't done by anyone, but there was a period of time in Almaty in Kazakhstan when they were running a number of competitions, and we were invited to one. And I show it because of one particular aspect. It's a huge program. It's an enormous building, which included office space and housing, hotel, entertainment facilities, and so on. It is in an area which is well known for seismic activity, for earthquakes. So we were working with an engineer by the name of Guy Nordenson. So we proposed the spring, which I don't think has been done yet, and there may turn out to be some propitious reasons for that. Because I remember talking to Guy about it initially, and he said something like, Moss, if you do this, Almaty is very close to Xinjiang province in China. He said, Moss, if you do this, the first earthquake in the building will be in Xinjiang province. Anyway, we started with this idea. It was amended over a period of time. Next, and I show you a little bit of the sequence. This has both to do with light and adjustments made to the spiral. Next. And this, by the way, we used a similar idea. We made a pavilion for the president of Austria at the Venice Biennale and worked out some of the details in the steel frame. You can see the steel frame as it goes around at particular points. It's no longer pipes, it's actually flattened out. Next. And a series of studies. Next. Next. This was one CNC study we made. Next. And then the presentation. Next. Next. We did again introduce, this is Republic Square, site of many public events. So we introduced in the project again an important public space or venue which attached to Republic Square, so that this is a climate which is either very hot or very cold. If it were either and neither worked, you could simply move into our building. Next. Next. This is a project that was done about 2-3 years ago, an existing simple warehouse building to which we added a sound studio and subsequently roof offices. The company is called the Tennis Channel. So I guess they do something like the Golf Channel, except it's with tennis balls. Next. This again raises the question I mentioned earlier about the meaning of architecture in relation to the time that it's done. So this is now later, like 07. And next, this is the Rhino model, which was essentially sent to a fabricator in Vancouver who made all of the sticks. The glue lamp beams are all different. The framing between the glue lamp beams, every stick in the building is different. So there was probably a time when that would have been either anathema or extremely difficult. It's neither now at this point. And all the contractor had to do, the sticks came back numbered. So all you had to be able to do is to count. And assuming you can count, you can put the pieces up consecutively. And sometimes, with the foibles of American education at the moment, not everyone can count. So not to be so we did run into a few problems in that regard, but conceptually, if this had been built 10 or 15 years earlier, the meaning of it as an act of construction, or even did you get it built, I think, reads out very differently than with the contemporary tools that are available to do this and to do this readily. That doesn't necessarily demean the spatial content, but it means the process of designing, fabricating, engineering, and construction needs to be understood differently now because the obstacles are different. Next. 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 This is a piece of fiberglass. We actually covered the building with blown-on fiberglass, which I think also hasn't been done, and we studied it in various manifestations because when it heats, it stretches, it enlarges, and when it's cold, it does the opposite, and also going around corners when one serves one temperature, the other, and so on. And I think this is not a solution per se, but an examination of prospects for solutions. Next. 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 This is one we did recently. Next. There are really two towers. One we're just starting on the left, which is a conference center, small conference center, and the other which goes alongside a little rehabilitation, which is a garden of cactuses. So this is the flying cactus garden. Next. Next. And what we did, and you can see this in the truss, so the pots which hold the plants are structural pieces, the steel, and the work and compression in the truss, much the way the glass tubes worked in the Smithsonian. So they are both pots for the cacti, and they are simultaneously elements, steel elements in compression. Next. Next. And you can see there, so the pots are sliced differently, so the cable then runs through the slot in the pot. You have to be careful where the roots go, you know. Next. Next. Just a few more. You bear with me. This is a discussion of towers and towers in an iconic way. Next. And which certainly has a pedigree. These are all projects you know, and there are many others. Next. And we had an opportunity to make one of these adjacent to a new train running on the west side of Los Angeles called the Expo Line. Next. And you can see it on the far right in the construction of the train. And the objective, the dynamics of the building in terms of how it was presented to the owner have to do with the positioning of screens. So the first screen faces a station to the east. The last screen faces a station to the west. Another screen faces the street, and another screen faces the train in motion. And if you go on around on the back, there's another screen where you can lecture. It's a material, it's a laminated plastic material. It doesn't distort. It hasn't been used before. We're still working on it. The audio is set, the visuals are set, the camera's in place. We're still trying to figure out exactly how to use it. And interestingly enough, by the way, no commercial uses are allowed on the screens. Next. You can see it's the ground is excavated, so it's set in a garden, a series of seats, and you see that one screen for lectures. Next. 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 So we're working on this and on a number of animations and so on, and I think we're pretty close to getting it right. And the theory is also, if you happen to be sitting in Sendai or Fukushima and you see some big piece of water coming, that you can send it to us and we'll get it up on the screen. So in theory, it's a source of information for whatever of them, and that obviously has to be edited. but a source of information for events of various kind coming from around the world. Next. This is a project at the Wexner Center, which I already mentioned, and it's nominal debt to Paul Damon. Next, which is essentially an ode to what I would call the grid system, and this is one of the oldest grid systems we know, Miletus and Hippodamus. But the essential argument is that the grid doesn't admit in its mechanics a center. There is no center, whereas the curve does. I think William Butler Yeats talked a little bit about centers and no centers. Next, so the Wexner was a building with no center. Next, at the same time, working with that vocabulary, about 99, 2000, 2001, we had an opportunity to do a high-rise building, and we adapted this center, no center form language for the project. Next. And this is the early study. Next. And then it went away. It went away, as things sometimes do in architecture. It went away for 10 years. It came back in a different form, and now we're building it, actually. Next. So this is the new one. It became a single tower. And you might notice the floor-to-floor heights are the three different floor-to-floor heights. One is about 8 meters, one is about 3.5, one is about 4.5. That doesn't happen very much, but it's happening here. So 3 different floor-to-floor heights. The highest one admits a mezzanine. Next. 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 This, if you don't recognize it, just for geographical lessons purposes, is called the Los Angeles River. Set in, so this is Los Angeles' version of a river. Next. This is the train coming by, which the advent of the train probably accounts for the fact that this thing is now getting built. Next one. And this was a little animation we made in order just to visualize the argument that very different warehouse types, which have become popular in New York and Chicago and LA as working venues, were essentially assembled and stacked vertically. So this isn't a high-rise building at all. It's an assembly of low-rise buildings. Next. And recently we made an exhibition which used both of those 99, 2000 projects, the tower and the Wexner, with another one next. This is hanging, what is that? Flak Tower. Yeah, so this is hanging in the Flak Tower in Austria, but it was originally done in LA. And if you look at it closely as something to operate, this is plasma cut. So this is pretty easy to do. Again, not that negates its meaning, but it gives it a different meaning that it might have had a few years ago when that process wasn't so known and wasn't available. Next. 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 The last two, this is a very similar project. One in Taiwan, Taichung, which was a competition we entered with a team in Taiwan, and Weihai, which we were invited to do, and looks like we will do. And as typical in China, Weihai is about an hour by plane due west of Incheon. And ambitious as always, the Chinese are making a resort and redoing the entire coastline. I mean, it's a colossal, and you would say it was unbelievable, but it's actually the opposite. It's entirely believable. Next, there's a little hill over there. Anyway, what this is a project with very little program. It's an icon for the site that sits on top of a hill with a little bit of office, a little bit of museum space, a restaurant, and a deck, specified site and specified height. Next one. And then again, the sequence, and you can read from upper left to lower right. There's a particularly interesting piece which has to do with the lateral bracing in the project. We were helped out a little bit by a company called Burrow-Happold and an engineer called Greg Otto. Next. So this is on the left is a partial print, and then the project we delivered about a month and a half ago. Next. And then a similar project in Taichung, iconic building, very little program, with an urban museum at the base. So you see the site and you see the intervention in a site. You actually enter below grade, and you can see maybe on the right the remaking of the entire landscape, indented in order to move pedestrians from the perimeter to the base of the building, and so on. Next. And then various steps, the pedestrian steps and the cores, floors, office floors, observation floors, and so on. Next. And the structural element which contains the museum, you can see that on the left, and in the center, an amphitheater sitting on top of that, which was part of the program, in the air, and then that cable net that wraps the structure. Next. And then the diagonal bracing, very similar to the one in Weihai. Next. Next. And this is the interior of the amphitheater looking up. Next. And this is just in scale. You can see the art tower there on the left. So this is for big structures for the urban museum. And next. In case you missed any of this and you want to buy the book, there it is. Thank you very much.
Si hay alguna pregunta para el arquitecto Rico Moss, por favor.
Euphemistically speaking, yes.
No, I mean, like, I was just wondering how you see that in your later projects, that it was more of a technical explanation towards it.
Well, I mean, you would have to be the evaluator of that. From my point of view, I think that each project has the capacity to carry a very salient and poignant message. Content, purpose, image, and not only that, to predict, as John, who wrote it, different John, in Revelation, anticipated what might be coming. So the capacity of architecture to deliver in terms of purpose, and also to suggest either what's lacking in content in architecture and what might be introduced to replace it, is certainly part of the ambition of all of these projects. What it is, what it ought to be, what it might be in the future. So in that sense, that I mean, I would stand by that aspiration. Architecture can do that. I mean, I have to say, by the way, that wouldn't necessarily negate any of a number of other issues. Because what I think I said is, even if Hannes Meyer and the Bauhaus has talked for 100 years about technique and technology and the expression of those things, you have to build buildings. Big things are built out of smaller pieces. You have to do that. And you have to put them together in one way or another. The reason I showed that conference room and the structure and the ledgers and the sticks was to give you an idea that you have to be cognizant of all of those things. So just because you're aware of a mission in a more abstract sense, that doesn't allow you to disown the other questions, which have to do with a kind of technical dexterity. That's still part of the project. So I don't want you to find yourself in a position where you have to say either there's a technical interest or there's a deeper or more profound aspiration, but not both. Because I think they're both valid.
Yeah, last night you were discussing with the editor of Arquitectura Viva the line of thought that
Galeano? Is he here? Is he? You know, I have to say, Jesus, I'm sorry he's not here. He was on the jury of the Mexico City Library, so I have to thank him and lobbied and editorialized in the right direction. I don't think I ever thanked him. He's a terrific guy. So whatever he said is great.
You were talking about the line of thought that architecture should reflect our status as society, and we're talking about chaos. Do you see some of your work doing that, or
No.
that discourse?
No. Did he say that?
Sort of.
No, I mean, you know, chaos is one of these. I mean, there are a lot of cliches bumping around architecture, and you know, everything to my kids, everything is awesome. I mean, almost nothing is awesome, you know. So I mean, chaos. I don't know if it's as popular now as it was 20 minutes ago. But I think that subjects are complicated and can be understood differently from different perspectives and appreciated in different ways from different perspectives, and things don't always fit, and they're not always neat, and they're not always orderly. And I think, as I said at the beginning, maybe they're mostly not. And if they're mostly not, then you can wonder about them or you can propose solutions. I don't think that necessarily means chaos. I think it's something as slightly more complicated. That's not a word that I would use. But if you see Luis, you should please say hello. I'm sorry I missed him. Okay, thank you. See you.